Thanks a million, everybody, for staying out in the cold with us today. I really do hope that I can look back and say that I was part of the pro-life generation. I do think this is a defining human rights issue for people of my generation. Like we've heard from Bernadette and others, when I was growing up and when I was a teenager, that's the thing that was subconsciously drip-fed to me about abortion. That it was okay because it was just a clump of cells. And we know today that that was a lie. We know that from 3D imagery when women get scans on their babies, that the average time when a woman gets an abortion, the baby's heart is beating. You can see the baby's fingers and toes. The baby can be seen sucking its thumb. And we were misled, and I feel completely duped, and I feel lied to. And the lies have continued in our own country with how we've seen the Oireachtas hearings have completely demolished the X case and the necessity to legislate for that. Personally, I've seen, and through friends and family members who have had abortions, the devastating effect that it's had on their lives. And Bernadette has told us of the hundreds and indeed around the world thousands of women. And these women are told to shut up because the story that they have to tell, people don't want to hear because it's not going with the status quo. We have to stand up and look at the effect that abortion has had in other countries in the world. If we had bowed to the pressure from Europe and we had followed our neighbours in Europe, where the average abortion is 1 in 4 people. So maybe some of you today have 4 children, or think of 4 of your best friends, or 4 family members that are close to you. If we had followed our European neighbours, one of those people simply would not exist. That is the reality of abortion. I know sometimes we can feel very deflated being pro-life, but I have to say, working with the pro-life campaign and talking to people like you at events like this or on the telephone, it makes me more pro-life than ever. For example, when I was outside the Dáil one day, a woman came up to me and she had tears in her eyes. She squeezed my arm and she said to me, "My mother was raped, and it was the most horrendous situation for my mother to have to go through. But she had the baby, and my sister deserves to be alive." Another story I heard as I was calling people to encourage them to come to Dublin, where we had 30,000 people saying that life is precious. She told me a story of an illness that she had, where had she been in the UK, the first port of call the doctors would have suggested would be to abort her child, to say that that child's life was not worth it. Then she went on to tell me of how she was given the best medical care in Ireland, and they did everything to support her and the child that she was carrying. And she told me all about her 22-year-old happy and healthy son. Our neighbours in Europe would have told that woman that his life simply was not worth living. We have to be really clear that the legislation that people are pushing for is not about medical treatments needed to safeguard women's lives. We have that in Ireland. It's simply about abortion. As we've heard at the Oireachtas hearings, 18 out of 18 psychiatrists unanimously agreed that abortion will never, ever provide the solution for women suffering from mental health issues such as suicidal ideation. And in fact, the overwhelming research shows us that a woman suffering with mental health problems, her risk may in fact be increased. So the X case, the 20-year-old ruling which heard no psychiatric evidence, and now we've seen today with all our research and our most expert psychiatrists, it would in fact be counterintuitive and damaging to women, and of course damaging to children, to legislate for X. An interesting thing was the perinatal psychiatrist, Dr. John Sheehan, saying at the Oireachtas hearings, the notion of carrying out an abortion is completely obsolete in terms of a person who is suicidal. Clearly, the intervention is to care for people and support them, not to make a decision that is permanent and irrevocable. I think the most important thing that we have to keep letting people know is if we legislate for X, we're basically saying, for the first time in Irish history, it is okay to take another human life. We also have to accept that I cannot think of any other case around the world or in Europe where so-called restrictive abortion has stayed that way. Let's look at our neighbours in the UK, where 97% of abortions carried out are on mental health grounds. And in the time since abortion has been introduced in the UK, Ireland's population in terms of numbers has been wiped out almost twice over. And similarly, as we've heard, in California, where they brought abortion in on very restrictive mental health grounds, where they had less than 600 abortions a year, within 2 years they had 61,000 abortions on the basis of mental health grounds. In the UK last year, 66 babies after failed abortions were born alive and left to die. 92% of babies that are diagnosed with Down syndrome in the womb are aborted and told that their lives are not worth living. And we say that being pro-choice is progressive and civilised. Those things are neither progressive or civilised. They're barbaric. Breda briefly touched on the leaked report about the tragic case of Savita Halappanavar. I heard a statement from Praveen Halappanavar's solicitor saying how upsetting this was for him that the media had leaked this report. It is an absolute disgrace that that report was leaked, and it is a disgrace for Savita and for Praveen that this report has been used to push an agenda on abortion when her death has nothing to do with abortion. So really, when you go away from here today, what can you do now? What can you do to ensure that Ireland stays pro-life? First of all, as we know, there's a lot of public confusion around the issue. I would really hope and encourage you to go onto the Pro-Life Campaign's website and read our briefing document, which really makes clear some of the issues that we've talked about today. Then use that in conversations where appropriate with friends and family. Please visit your local TDs and let them know, because they too are confused. And, you know, before Christmas, a lot of TDs were saying to us, thanks for the postcards, and we're getting so many of them. And in recent weeks, I've heard some TDs say, where the Pro-Life campaign gone? So please keep knocking on those doors. We've got our postcards here today, so send as many of them as possible. The last thing I would like to say is that every woman that I've ever spoken to who has had an abortion, when I asked them why they had an abortion, they've always said to me, Wendy, I had an abortion because I felt I had no choice. What we need to do is provide women who find themselves in difficult situations and in crisis pregnancy situations, we need to provide them with a real choice. I do not want to live in an Ireland that says to women who find themselves in difficult situations, your only option is to go and end the life of the child inside of you. So let's provide women in Ireland with a real choice, and let's be proud of our Ireland that supports life and together unite for life in Ireland. Thanks.